having touched that secondary point, we can move on to the major topic, which is that really of online education and its importance in our times. You know, and I always stress that the internet, you know, is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us.
Yes, indeed it is.
If we look at when the internet showed up in the early 80s, late 70s, etc., you know, this was at a time when, you know, Muslims were coming under attack in the media all around the world, and we didn't have any means of response. The media were Islamophobic, and were constantly attacking Muslims, and we didn't have any opportunity for us to express our points of view, respond to what was being said, etc. And then the internet was accidentally discovered by Western scientists. They weren't actually looking for the internet. If you look to the history of the discovery of the internet, it was an accident, unplanned. They were not trying to do it, but it happened. So we understand, of course, it's not just an accident, it's a blessing from Allah. Allah is the one who caused it to happen. And it gave us now a means to respond, to express our views, our beliefs, etc. You know, even the youngest of our children who have access to the internet, they can go up and write an article about, you know, their Islamic experiences or whatever, positive, etc. So this is something which has fallen into our laps. And of course, myself, when I accepted Islam in 1972, the opportunities for studying Islam in Toronto, where I accepted Islam, were not there. The people who were there in Toronto were just immigrants from Egypt or Bangladesh or other countries, Jordan, etc., India. They didn't have knowledge. They were just immigrants trying to immigrate to Canada, to live there, to make a new life for themselves. So I was forced within the first 2 years of my Islam to decide that if I was going to understand this religion properly, I had to leave Canada. And I left.
How old were you?
I went to Medina. Pardon?
How old were you then?
I was around 25.
MashaAllah.
I left at that time, and I went with my wife and child to Medina to study. So the reality is that I had no other choice. And others came and tried also, like myself. In fact, myself and Abdullah Hakim Quick, Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick, we were the first two Americans to graduate from Medina University.
Yeah.
There were none before us.
Wallahi,
But
just
there are many who tried.
to tell the viewers that Medina University is Islamic University of Al-Madinatul Munawwara, which is located in KSA.
Shukran.
Barakallah.
So I think, of course, Medina University, we tend to think of it as being everybody knows, but definitely we do need to give them that clarification, additional clarification. So the point is that there in Saudi Arabia, I mean, this was the opportunity for us to study and to get the knowledge and bring it back to our communities in the West. You know, and after us, others came, and alhamdulillah, more and more have gone and have studied there and have gone back and have benefited communities in the West where Islamic knowledge was not available from an academic perspective. However, that journey, very few people are able to make it. Of the tens of thousands of applications that are, you know, given to study in Medina or in Mecca or, you know, in other Muslim countries, in Egypt or in Jordan, etc., Yemen previously, very few make it. Maybe it's less than 1%.
Wow.
So the chances of being able to go there and study is very, very limited. However, with the advent of the internet, it became possible. You know, from the 90s, 2000 onwards, 21st century, we have a situation now where it is possible to study online without going anywhere. And this is, you know, something which we as Muslims need to strengthen, need to
take advantage
exploit, need to get the most from it and make knowledge and education available to our communities. Because the reality that we find many politicians in our countries, different Muslim countries, etc., who will always speak about universal education, education for all. Reality is that we are not able to build sufficient universities for our populations. Physical universities, not possible. In Africa, for example, where we have focused a number of learning centers for the International Open University, which I established, as you mentioned earlier. It used to be known as the Islamic Online University, but the name changed to the International Open University when our subjects became more, we could quote unquote call it secular, but Islamized secular, than our specifically Islamic programs. So the International Open University has, in its research, found that in the countries in Africa, for example, less than 10% of high school graduates make it to university. Less than 10%. This is extremely low. Even in Indonesia, for example, it's less than 30%. And that's still considered globally very low. But in Africa, it is particularly low. And reality is that it's not possible to build universities to put all these students in. And for the governments involved, what is involved in building universities and then providing free education, etc., as many of them provide on the primary level and secondary levels, it's not possible. The only way forward is online education. That's the reality. That's the future. The future of education in the Muslim world is online.
You see, Dr.
We should be ready to embrace it at every opportunity that's given to us.
You see, Dr. Bilal, last couple of years, even in the medical school, no one was attending physically. They were attending the classes online, including the anatomy classes, which was a few years ago, you would think it's impossible. When we were in the medical school, we used to attend 6 days a week, and sometimes the professors would bring us on Friday, so that's 7 days a week, and they say that you will not be successful in this field unless if you eyewitness everything by yourself. But with as I can see you clearly right now, and with the 4D as well, it has become feasible and accessible. And this is with regards to studying medicine, with regards to attending classes of toxicology, pharmacology, and even anatomy classes. A few years back, before COVID, I visited Japan, and I was invited to visit a Japanese family who reverted to Islam a few years before I visited. They were Buddhist. And then they introduced their 2 sons, one named Musa and the other was named Isa, 4 years old and 3 years old. So the little Musa came wearing his pajamas before going to sleep, and they said that he's been anxiously waiting to meet you so he can recite Quran for you. To be honest with you, I thought he's going to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. So he was reciting تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير. I was so impressed. So his mom and dad, so his mom and dad said, oh, you can test him. He has memorized 2 parts of the Quran. I said 2 parts, he's only 4 years old. That Sheikh Bilal, he was reciting so beautifully, you think that he's attending the halqa in Al-Masjid al-Nabawi on daily basis, or Al-Qura in Mecca, or in Al-Azhar, Egypt. You know, pure Japanese. So I thought maybe the mom happened to know Arabic, maybe they migrated. So I asked them, they said, no, we're learning online. We contracted one sister in the Middle East, so she's teaching me and my children. 4 years old, knows how to recite Quran better than those who were born to Arabic parents and have achieved memorizing 2 parts. So I tested him and I put the videos on my wall. So I thought, this is the most solid proof that if anyone is sincere in his or her intent, not just in learning a little bit about the deen, but in becoming a scholar in usul al-fiqh, the principles of jurisprudence, it's available and accessible. Ilm al-qira'at and the different dialects of the Quran, it's accessible online. And I think, mashallah, Allah has blessed you, Dr. Bilal, because you have taken the initiative a long time ago, before most online universities. So I know that we have very short time, but including myself, not only the viewers, would like to know, how did you get this idea? And in the beginning, I'm sure it looked like a strange idea, maybe a crazy one. Were you kind of skeptical? Did people inhibit you and thought it's not gonna work, and who would sign up online and who would be patient to learn online? Especially in the beginning, the internet was not as fast as nowadays, of course.
Well, the idea came to me actually, you know, having taught in schools, private schools, in university, in Riyadh and in the UAE, and set up Islamic studies departments, you know, on in universities which were not specifically Islamic universities in the UAE. People had contacted me over the internet, right? Written to me, sent emails to me asking me about studying in particular websites online, you know, sunnah.com or something to that effect. They asked me. So I went to this website and I checked it, and then I found that, oh, the ideas of this website, you know, were distorted. There was, yes, some good factual information, but there was also distortions. But I felt myself embarrassed to tell them, well, no, you shouldn't go to this website because, you know, there's deviation there or whatever. And they then had nothing to go to, no place to go to learn. So the best I could do was just to tell them, well, okay, you know, focus on the hadith, okay, it's fine. If you're going to
forget about the articles and aqidah and so, just forget about other subjects.
Yeah, leave those subjects. You know, that's basically what I could advise them. But at the same time, I felt a need at that point that we should have, you know, some websites which offered study for Muslims anywhere around the world to be able to study Islam, you know, from authentic sources. So this is when, it's about 2001, you know, the idea came to me and I tried to do it at that time. But as you mentioned, the learning management systems required were very expensive at that time. I couldn't afford it. You know, we tried to do it using databases and things like this, but they didn't survive. So I had to put the plan back in the shelf and wait, you know, for the time that either, you know, I got enough people together to fund the cost of a learning management system, or, you know, through Allah's mercy, it became available at no cost. And alhamdulillah, maybe 5 years later, in fact, an Australian educationalist who had IT background, etc., he created a learning management system and he offered it to the world for free. So at that point, I jumped on it. Once I found out about it, my son informed me. He was in IT. And, you know, from 2007, we started the process of setting up the university. And 2010, we launched the Islamic Online University. Prior to that, it was it focused on free Islamic studies from all of the various fields without specific structure. But from 2010, we launched it according to the Usuluddin, or Islamic fundamental areas of study program, which existed in Al-Azhar, in Medina University, as well as in Durman University in Sudan. So this became the beginning of what came to be known as the Islamic Online University. And alhamdulillah, within the first year or two, people were flocking to the university.
Wow.
In larger and larger numbers. Actually, before that, in 2009, I had gone to India and set up a physical university. I was invited by Muslim leaders in Chennai, in South India, and I went there and helped them set up a university, online, it's not online, physical. Offline university there in Chennai. Alhamdulillah, it continues to run till today. But the difference in terms of numbers, within the first year, even though the university in Chennai had already been running for a couple of years, within the first semester of the first year online, we had far surpassed the numbers who were registered in Chennai in South India. And it just took off like a Boeing 747, headed across the world.
MashaAllah.
So alhamdulillah, our students increased from countries around the world that we didn't even know existed. Till now, we have students from over 229 different countries in the world.
That's
it's amazing.
About the whole world.
Yes, we've covered the whole world.
Do you, by any means, remember, like currently, how many students already registered versus since the beginning, how many students have graduated already?
How many students have registered? We have over 600,000 students
Allahu Akbar.
have registered.
And currently,
but many people will register, look around, so and so, and then say, "Oh, I don't think I can handle it," whatever. Because most people are they're thinking, hey, okay, it's online, so it must be what we call a Mickey Mouse program. Very easy. You go in and like playing on video games or whatever. But when they find it to be a solid, complete, serious program, most people really don't have the time to commit.
They will.
Or not prepared to commit the time. So the actual numbers, that have actually enrolled in the courses and gone through and studied, we're talking about 6,000. That's from 600,000 down to 6,000.
Those who graduated.
But alhamdulillah, we have 2,000 to 3,000 students registering every semester.
But if we want to tell the students whom even before we met, so I direct them to the authentic sources if they want to seek knowledge, whether physical universities or virtual academies and universities like yours. If you want to acquaint the audience with what kind of program you offer and the advantages of studying there, what do they get? I know, mashallah, currently you're also teaching Islamic psychology, teaching business administration from an Islamic perspective, a lot of subjects. So what can be tempting for a person instead of signing up in a physical university to study there? Also with regards to the accreditation. So there are three questions in one. With regards to what the students get if they really have the will, the strength, and they sign up and they finish the entire course. Secondly, the fields and the area of studies, not only the usul-ud-din, the fiqh and hadith, and the Quran and the tajweed, as you just mentioned earlier, that there are secular subjects but being Islamicized. I remember maybe 7 years ago when we met in Kuala Lumpur, you were talking about putting curriculums for chemistry and physics. I'm not sure if you remember that.
It has always been a part of our thought, but inshallah we will get there eventually.
Right.
But in terms of the university as program, it began with only Islamic studies. So that's why we were the Islamic Online University. We offered a Bachelor's of Arts in Islamic Studies. And we're teaching it in English medium with Arabic as a subject. Because normally when you go to Medina University or Al-Azhar or any of the other Arabic universities, you will spend 2 years or 2.5 years studying Arabic. And then after doing that, you go and study your various Islamic disciplines in Arabic. Now, you've just added 2 years to your normal BA that a person would get in countries around the world. So what I decided to do, since most of the students who were studying had some English background, was to make English the main language of the university that the material is being taught in, and Arabic as a subject that they took simultaneously with their English Islamic studies. So that would cut down the time that the students were required to attend studies in, by a good 2 years. Furthermore, realities, of course, with students going back to their local countries, especially those of English medium countries, they will not be teaching in Arabic anyway. So those who went and studied, in Medina and Mecca or Azhar or Jordan, studying in Arabic, when they go back home, they end up having to teach in their local languages anyway.
True.
And oftentimes they forget the Arabic, or the Arabic becomes weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker because they're not communicating in Arabic in the society in which they go back to.
But you haven't forgotten your Arabic, though. We communicate with each other in Arabic.
No. That's true. That's true. And most people who have studied a good 4 years in Arabic in 2 years before that preparing themselves, I mean, they're not going to forget the Arabic, because they will still try to keep in contact with others who are Arabic speaking, or other graduates like themselves, and they talk in Arabic. So it's there. We don't lose it. But the reality, though, is that the English is a more universal language today than Arabic. There was a time when, of course, Arabic was the universal language of the regions east, west, and south, from Arabia to the west and as well as to the east. So that was a time. We're in another time, a time where English is the dominating language, is the dominant language.
Correct.
So this is why I chose to go that route. And of course, you know, we have, of course, translated this Islamic Studies program, we call the BAIS program, Bachelor of Arts in Islamic Studies. We've translated it into Russian, we've translated it into Urdu, we've translated it into Indonesian, the Indonesian language, Malay language, Bahasa.
The
Malay.
entire syllabi?
Pardon?
The entire syllabus?
Of the bachelor's program, yes.
Wow.
Completely translated.
How many hours
total? We're working on the French, and we're working on the Chinese. So we want to make the knowledge available. I mean, that is, this is very important, that we make it as accessible as possible to Muslims and as well as non-Muslims in other regions on the earth. So our university began with this model, Islamic Studies. In the Islamic Studies program, I introduced other subjects which I felt a graduating student from an Islamic university should know. Because when we graduate from these Islamic universities, Arabic universities, and we go back home to our countries, we are expected to do a number of things. For example, when we come back, we are asked to lead many times. The graduate who comes back, he has the knowledge, the community makes him their leader.
True.
But he doesn't have leadership, managerial skills and qualities, etc. You know, he doesn't have these skills. He never studied management, how to manage a community. He's never studied it. So I felt management courses should be added to the Bachelor of Arts in Islamic Studies program. Also, when he returns or she returns, the community look at them as the solver of their problems. They have all kinds of problems, whether it's marital problems, business problems, community problems, children problems. They come to them and say, okay, what is the answer? What should we do? So they're required to counsel the community. But they didn't study counseling. So I introduced also some courses which students taking BAIS also had to take in psychology. They had to take some counseling psychology courses which would prepare them when they go back to their communities to be able to benefit them through counseling.
And obviously anyone can sign up for that particular course, doesn't have to be within the BA program.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, at that time, it was within the BA program. But of course, you could still take this individual course, even though you didn't take the whole program. But it was not a separate discipline. It was just a course.
Correct.
So what happened is that, and I added also to it IT, because many of the graduates from the Islamic universities, they're out of touch with IT. You know, the world moved on and they were still, you know, stuck with the regular typewriters. So the students who are studying should have some IT knowledge. And like this, we added something in education. They're asked to teach, but they haven't been taught how to teach. So I added courses in education. So the standard Bachelors of Arts in Islamic Studies, which were being offered by the Islamic Online University, it had now become beefed up so that the graduate would be well-rounded to be able to serve the needs of the community. Because appropriate knowledge, you know, is perhaps even more important than just knowledge itself. That knowledge which
would you please repeat that last phrase again, Dr. Bilal?
Pardon?
Would you please repeat that last phrase again? What is more important than acquiring knowledge itself is?
I'm saying that appropriate knowledge, acquiring appropriate knowledge is more important than merely acquiring knowledge.
Yeah, so it's not about spending time in a school.
For the sake of knowledge.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter whether it's useful or it's not useful. But the Prophet ﷺ used to say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa.
True.
Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from knowledge which is of no benefit. You know, so the appropriate knowledge is the beneficial knowledge. You know, that we have to be selective because there's so many things out there. And this is one of the things that Muslim countries suffer from today, that instead of teaching in the universities the courses which are necessary for the development of the country's infrastructure, etc., they're teaching courses in robotics and, you know, high sciences that are so deep. When you graduate, you cannot work in your country. Instead, you have been trained now to be sucked into America, Canada, UK, Europe, Norway, whatever, Sweden. You're sucked into these countries because you can't find a job with the skills that you now have in your own country. So it is very important that we are selective in the courses that we offer in the universities, and that's why the Islamic Online University became the international open university, because those areas that we had added to round out the Islamic studies graduate, we expanded them into colleges.
So that